Hey, welcome back to the Security Repo Podcast. This week we have an amazing guest that I met down at Agile 2024, an Agile conference in Texas. Garrett Gross is with us. He's a seasoned cybersecurity professional with over 20 years of experience, and he currently is the head of product success at Nudge Security. His primary focus is implementing innovative strategies to address SaaS sprawl and mitigate the risks associated with shadow IT. He's got a strong background in security operations, incident response, and threat research. Garrett's experience and dedication to the field are evident, and he actively contributes to the cybersecurity community by collaborating with organizations such as OWASP and ISSA, I guess, aiming to elevate industry standards and best practices. Welcome to the Security Repo.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Glad to be here.
And also, Kazar, I wanted to say welcome to you. You are a new co-host around here with the departure of Mac. So this is a new era. Did you want to do a quick intro to yourself?
Yes, definitely. So, hi everyone. Thanks, Ryan, for having me on. I am Kaysar. I am security lead here at Guardian, and I'm based in Paris, France.
Awesome. Well, with that, I talked to you a bit back at Agile 2024 about this whole topic of shadow IT, but I know you wanted to kick things off with the first question here, Kazar.
Yes, definitely. Garrett, we have this question often from our clients here at Guardian, and I do not have a proper answer, so I'd like some help here, if you will. In your opinion, why is it so hard to understand an organization's attack surface and, of course, the user's attack surface as well?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a that's a pretty broad question. I think it's a couple of components. I think you can boil it down to generally things are always changing. I think our attack surface, our definition of an environment or a perimeter, that's always been evolving over the past couple of years. And you combine that with the fact that, from my perspective, when you stare through a business lens at something like an attack surface or just IT operations, security operations, it's not always prudent to have this gigantic investment in security. And I can't believe that those words are escaping my lips, but, keeping up with those problems and kind of constantly combating that's not on everyone's top priority list. So us in security and IT operations, we find ourselves kind of on our heels as things change. We're having to change our approaches rapidly as well. And again, you introduce the users into that equation, and I mean, anything is possible at that point.
In your opinion, Garrett, how do security professionals? Okay, let's edit that out. How can security professionals maybe improve their understanding and their contribution to the organization's overall posture by understanding the business itself? Like, is that really important for us security professionals, or can we skip the operational business side of things and focus on the techie stuff? What do you think of that?
Yeah, great. Another great question. I think that if you're in the trenches, it's probably best for you to not consider that, because you have a very express, pointed job to do in your defense or elucidating attack scenarios, stuff like that. But as you move up higher in the management structure of security, absolutely, I think it's something that it's very important context to understand what the perception of your initiatives and ideas are going to be from a business standpoint. Because let's be honest here, if you don't have buy-in, if you don't have financial backing from the organization, you're not going to be able to get a lot of these initiatives off the ground, no matter how proactive or how innovative your ideas are. You still have to have someone that's gonna foot the bill on that. And you combine that with the fact that, unfortunately, those of us in security, and this also extends to IT operations, we've kind of been perceived as this black hole that you just throw money into. Shifting that perception, I think, is very important and something to consider.
I definitely want to dig into the money side of it, because you shared some alarming stats back at the conference when I saw you give this talk. You said 50% of tech budgets are outside of IT. How is that a thing?
Well, if you think about it, we've, and this is very central to everything that I discuss about this problem, is that things have moved from a very centralized and IT and security standpoint to pretty much distributed out to the entire organization, to where each each organization, sales, marketing, of course, engineering and product development, finance, HR, they all have their own technology stack these days. So like all of these tools, all of these initiatives, they're all independently managed by these individual organizations that each have their own technology budget that, depending on the organization, that technology might originate from IT, it might be provisioned or initially deployed, but it's very quickly handed off to your stakeholders that are in those individual departments. So yeah, those budgets are not as centralized within IT and security as we've seen in the past.
So you brought up an interesting stat, an actual number you could assign to this on wasted licenses. You said it was about 135,000 a year. And you compared that to other things we could spend our money on, and you could maybe share a couple of those.
Yeah. So, we again, to the point earlier that we're just unfortunately perceived as just like this giant cost center, due to the fact that it's hard to keep up with all this technology that's being deployed and managed or, maintained and constantly being renewed. There's a lot of wasted spend. Back to your question on the attack surface, it's very difficult to really understand who's using what, especially if we're talking about SaaS applications. We're wasting on average, like you said, $135,000 a year in just stuff that no one's using, or either it's duplicative use or it's stuff that's been abandoned and it's just getting renewed anyway. So as a way to kind of drive that point home, I asked ChatGPT some better ways to spend that $135,000, and there were things like gold-plated staplers, and putting a fortune teller on staff to help with product decisions, or my favorite, which was building a moat for the executive floor. Because security is important, so why not a moat with alligators?
Yeah. Just going back to the 50% of tech budgets are outside of IT topic. Very simple question for you, Garrett. Is that a good thing or a bad thing in your opinion?
I think there are pros and cons of that. I think that centralized understanding of where the money is being spent was always kind of a benefit. But also, I think it's also a detriment because you concentrate all that spending within IT, and the perception is that that's an IT expense or that's a security expense, when in fact, as I mentioned earlier, all these systems are integrated in these other business units to where that's their spend. And it's oftentimes, a lot of times we look at security problems as this is something that security mandates, but it's IT's job to, deploy and like patching is a great example. Patching is technically an IT operations function, but it's mandated, or the priority is really elucidated by security. It's the same thing if you think of like a sales tool. I in security have no bearing on what sales tools are used or why or how, but my wishes and how those tools are secured, I have to use part of my budget in security to help secure those tools. And again, so to answer your question, it does muddy the water a little bit, but I think it provides a more realistic picture of who's spending money where and the importance of managing and securing that technology across the organization, not just from a IT or security origin.
I definitely agree with you on this point. And, you said something that's very, very interesting to me. It's that, sometimes security ends up spending its own budget to secure someone else's tool or system or what have you. And, that's perfectly fair, right? That's just how life works. And within that context, security still has to deliver its own roadmap, right? It still has to accomplish its own goals and objectives. And sometimes, to accomplish that, you have to say no to that new shiny tool that finance wants to get their hands on, or HR, or any other team in the company. So, in the past few months and years, I have had the opportunity, let's say, of just saying no, telling people, no, that does not fit within our security stack, does not fit with our objectives. And, I'm afraid that I'm turning into one of those security people who just says no all the time. So why is this happening to me? Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So it's kind of I don't want to say it's a cliche statement, but we're also oftentimes seen as the department of no. And that really kind of starts to callous people sometimes. It's like, oh, Garrett in security, he's just trying to ruin my party. It's like, well, no, it's because we have a mandate. But what we're finding now that this, technology adoption, not only the management, but just everyone kind of, deploying their own technology, we need to shift our perception in to where we're not the department of no, we're the department of how. Because again, like I'm not here to dictate that sales cannot use a certain tool, but I need to understand why they need to use this new tool. And then more importantly, I need to understand how I can enable them to use this new functionality or this new tool in a very secure way, because, we're all here to make sure that our business runs smoothly. And that's, to me, is the bottom line of security and IT operations, is to support the business. So, again, as much as in the past, I've definitely been the knee jerk, like, no, you can't do that. You can't use that remote access tool. It's on us in security to go a bit deeper and try to understand the motivations of these individuals and to try to empower and support them in the things that they want to do. Because, the better that they can do their job, the better it all, results for us. What's the colloquialism? The rising tide, supports all ships or whatnot.
Yeah, I love that. I love the team of how, but that raises another question. It's, well, am I supposed to be an expert in everything? Is that what I'm supposed to do, Garrett? Help me out here.
I mean, hasn't that been the challenge always, is that we have to have about an inch deep and a mile wide purview of all the technology that's being introduced? No. And that's a really good point, and we could probably have a whole talk about just this one subject, but I think it's very prudent, especially now. I mean, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but we need to start now bringing folks into our security discussions, embedding ourselves into, marketing discussions about these technology, to where, not only can we learn from our peers, but we can also support one another, because I think it's, to your point, unreasonable to expect that we're going to be experts on all the new marketing technology and what their capabilities are. But as we spread out that investment across the different teams, I think that's kind of where we can help kind of support one another, learn from each other, and develop these new ideas, to where, again, you're not expected to be the expert, but you might be the shepherd of organizing these discussions going forward.
And it's a very salient point here, especially as this is not a shrinking problem. This continues to grow. I think the number you shared was 60 new SaaS seats or 60 new SaaS assets added daily at a large, like your average large company. Is that really the rate? Like,
yeah, the stat came from average size of 1,000 employees, over 60 new SaaS assets. Say that 5 times fast. 60 new SaaS assets are added daily, which, when you think about that, that's going to be someone's full-time job, just kind of keeping track of all that kind of stuff as it comes in. And not to mention all of the entry points and different components that have been introduced over time. That's why in a lot of my talks, I liken this to having to secure a building downtown where the employees can just add, entrances and exits as they see fit throughout the office building.
That is a little terrifying. But let's talk on some better news, though, some better terms. Like, how do we get away from that department of no? And that's one of the reasons I brought you on the show. And that was the heart of your talk I saw. And I think it's on your shirt, actually. This concept of nudging intervention, empowering people through guardrails and guidance. So love to hear you tell us how we can get that done.
Yeah, sure. So it's all rooted in psychology, and Kesar, I think we started that discussion about empowerment versus, blocking. We did a case study with a university a while back, to where we basically gave folks a series of intervention conditions, to where, they had a task, they had to use an external system to get a task done, but then we would intervene and kind of give them different methods of intervention. One, of course, was just blocking them from visiting the site. Another one of them was they got a nasty gram from security after the fact saying, hey, you've done something bad and you're going to be, penalized for it. And the third intervention was a much more reasonable, and I'd say friendly intervention of like, hey, I see you've, signed up for this SaaS app. Can you tell me a little bit more about it so we can better understand, again, how to support your use of this technology moving forward? because, I mean, there's several reasons for that. First and foremost, if you come in and just blindside a team and say, hey, you can't use that, there's going to be a lot of confusion. There's going to be a lot of resentment. There's going to be a lot of, wow, Garrett just hates me and just doesn't want me to get my job done. But, really that's going to breed folks that will just circumvent your controls anyway. I mean, we've done other studies to where most of the respondents have no problem bypassing cybersecurity guidance if they feel that it's going to help them get their job done. And, that makes sense. If you've got a approval process that lasts a month, it takes a month to get an application approved, yet this development team has a deadline in 2 weeks. Well, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to say that, the juice is worth the squeeze, and I'm just going to go around and use this generative AI tool or whatnot. So, the founders of Nudge, good friends of mine, they came up with the concept of, why don't we just intervene and provide guidance on how to implement this technology safely? And it produces a much better result. And if you combine that with extremely targeted and active discovery of this technology, as soon as these, apps are being signed up for, you can actually intervene as they're being deployed and have a reasonable discussion of like, hey, this is great that you want to use this. Let's talk about how to, best protect its use, or deploy in a secure fashion, or deploy in adherence with our acceptable use policy. Because if you do that on the forefront, just psychologically, it's going to net you much better results than, again, 2 months later, where I get some alert from our endpoint detection and I'm like, what KSAR you're using? What? And then, it just results in that kind of like, fire drill type, activity where everyone's prickly and everyone's on edge and you're reacting rather than, kind of moving forward in a proactive manner.
But how do you detect that soon enough in the in the workflow?
Yeah. So, from a technical standpoint, there's a lot of different ways to do that. We've kind of gotten away from the concept of network detection, because what is a network perimeter in 2024? It's usually your mobile device, your laptop, or who knows what. So there are different ways of doing this. You can put agents on endpoints. You can put agents in your browser. But again, that's just going to capture a small piece of that adoption, which, not to say that that's a bad idea, because, network inspection, endpoint inspection is still important. But what we found is that we can actually target the genesis of these account signups through, I mean, think about it. As soon as you sign up for a SaaS app, what's the first thing that happens? They're going to send you an email and they're going to say, hey, Dwayne, thanks so much for signing up for, catpicsforyou.com. Looks like you changed your password. Looks like Garrett just shared with you a folder of cat pics, things of that nature. So we're able to actually capitalize on that one connection point that these SaaS vendors have with their end users, which is email. And we can identify those account signups as soon as they happen. And then again, if you can combine that with the ability to reach out and engage your user base in a efficient and, I'd say convenient manner, you actually have the ability to intervene very early on, or earlier on in that adoption lifecycle rather than later. And that's really the crux of it, is very scientifically accurate discovery paired with the ability to efficiently reach out to your user base. Because I can tell you from my experience, even with all the information in the world, getting answers from users can be a futile effort if you're not doing it in a way that's conducive to your user base. My horror story was, I was in a very active environment a couple of years ago where I was building and managing the SOC, and it's like everyone would sign up for AWS environments for some reasons. Like they'd have a test, as some development initiative, someone would sign up for an AWS environment, and then asking 1,000 engineers, hey, who owns account number 8019? I might as well just been wasting my breath, because it was just crickets every single time.
So you said something interesting there, about getting into the email.
Mhm.
So is that part of how your platform works? You're intercepting or reading certain emails, all emails? Do you have any backlash from that? People saying, "Don't read my email."
Some people do have a knee-jerk reaction to that of like, oh, you're, big brother, you're reading my emails. But all of us on the technical side have a very strong security background, and we recognize that, we don't want to be big brother, and we don't want to give you the impression that we're reading your emails. So the way that we do it is we actually sit out of band of the email flow, and we target those inbound machine-generated emails. So we're looking for things in the subject line from known senders. We're not just intercepting all messages and sifting through them. We're performing very targeted searches on those specific account sign up, password reset, other emails that might indicate the existence of an account. And then the way that we do it is very securely. We use bots to perform the searches, perform the analysis. The bots, perform it all in memory and then self-destruct afterwards. So we're never storing messages. Humans are actually never putting their eyes on your email. So the way that we see it is if there were an incident later, we would be looking through those emails anyway to figure out what had transpired. So this is just what we feel is a very non-invasive, proactive way to analyze this activity, because we're not looking at outbound emails. We're not looking at employee to employee comms. It's only targeting those messages that should be sent from vendors.
That's a very elegant way of handling it, because, I personally end up sometimes having to investigate incidents or, bugs or what have you. And I end up in a situation where I have to sift through email titles, subject lines, that sort of thing. And I would love it if something could do that for me, because, of course, I am very lazy, but also because, there are so many emails and I can't, humanly sift through them all. So that makes definite sense.
Yeah, it's not possible to do that from a forensic standpoint for every piece of activity that you identify. So yeah, again, getting ahead of that and then intervening as soon as possible, that's been the key to our success in helping our customers, solve this rapidly evolving problem that just doesn't seem to go away or slow down.
So I'm curious to how that ties in with the rest of the automation. Does that trigger like Slack bots? Does that trigger another email? Like what's it look like from the end user perspective when they do sign up for a new thing and you realize it?
Yeah, great question. So, everyone does security differently, and we're not here to prescribe that you change your methodology. But the way that we recommend it is to set up automation to where, as soon as we would discover the existence of one of these accounts, we can automate a message that would go out over email, go out over Slack, and just say exactly that. It would come from me, and it would say, hey, Dwayne, looks like you just signed up for this app. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? And then in an automated fashion, you can respond to those messages. That'll tell me kind of what your motivations are, what type of data this app touches, and just, it starts that conversation. Excuse me. It starts that conversation quicker than it usually would get started. So not only does that act as a force multiplier to your team, so KSAR, to your point, it's putting time back in your day as a security team, but then also it's starting that conversation as soon as possible, and it shortens that gap between detection and your ability to do something about it, to where you actually stand a chance of stopping someone from spinning up an evaluation version of software and hooking it up to your file share, or like a sensitive code repo. Or what we see a lot today are people that sign up for new generative AI applications and then just send a bunch of potentially sensitive information into those prompts. So if you can, you get that discovery, you get that early intervention, you can actually have that conversation a lot earlier than possible, and just set expectations and direct your users in the way that you want them to adopt and use this technology.
So you've already been talking about Nudge quite a bit here. Could you just give us a quick high level? Like, I think you've already explained what the tool does, but a little bit where we can follow you, if there's blog posts or other information we can get about this out there.
Yeah, sure. So, nudgesecurity.io, nudgesecurity.com. We're, all over all the socials that I don't peruse, due to what we do for a living. But, the best part about it is we take a very product-led growth standpoint to where you can go download our trial. You can check it out yourself. You can get an asset inventory of all the SaaS apps that your employees have signed up for. And then, if you like it, great, sign up with us and move it forward. And then, as new people are signing up for these applications, you can become notified, or as I mentioned earlier, automate the entire process of contacting your users and starting that dialogue.
And if we wanted to follow you, it sounds like you're not a huge fan of the social media, but to catch up on you where you're speaking next or anything else you're putting out there in the world, where can we follow you at?
I'd probably look me up on LinkedIn. That'd probably be the best way to put that. I'll broadcast speaking engagements that I have. Admittedly, I'm terrible at social media and really bad about self promotion. But usually, if I'm speaking, especially on behalf of Nudge, I will broadcast something out on like the Nudge LinkedIn, or I'll reshare it on my own personal LinkedIn page.
Awesome. Well, we're coming up here on the end of the show. Great episode this week. But we always like to play a game with all of our guests, the best and the worst advice. So we'll ask you first, what's the best security advice you can give anybody out there listening that you've heard or somebody gave you? And then what was the worst security advice they ever received? Let's start with the good.
Okay.
Best advice you could give.
Best advice I could give, and it's part and parcel to what we're talking about today, is to try and foster deep relationships with your stakeholders, with your users, just anyone that you want to secure. Keep those lines of communication open at all times. That includes inviting people from other departments into your security meetings. From an incident response standpoint, I like to let everyone know that anyone can be an incident responder and anyone can report an incident. So really kind of, I think fostering that communication bidirectionally is probably the best advice that I've gotten. The other thing that I would probably mention that's something applicable to everyone is start security awareness training now. Like just right now, whatever you're doing, if you're not training your users on security awareness, it's a very low cost, high reward strategy that has definitely served me very well in the past.
That is great advice. I love that. Awareness. We can't do enough awareness training out in the world, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So what's the worst advice? What's the anti-advice that you've been given over the years?
Yeah, I was trying to think ahead a minute on that one. It really all revolves into kind of burying your head in the sand and maybe things around the shared responsibility security model, especially as all of our infrastructure is on, SaaS apps these days. So things like relying on defense in depth, saying things like, conversely, all of my assets are critical. Don't worry, we've secured that thing. Or, actually, probably the worst advice, the worst sentiment that I've ever received is something along the lines of, don't worry, we're too small, we're not important enough, or we're too smart to be a target of threat actors. I would say that is the biggest misstep ever, is someone thinks that they're either too good or not good enough to be a target. The second you let your defenses down is when you start to get taken advantage of.
Right on. I think attackers don't really care. They're just moving down the list.
That's right. A lot of spray and pray, a lot of just opportunistic attacks and things of that nature. Yeah.
That's what we keep hearing from the Verizon DBIR and other sources. Like, yep, this cybercrime is opportunistic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks very much for being here and sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us. Kazar, anything else you want to say before we sign off?
No, it's been brilliant chatting with you today, Garrett. I really loved your takes, and I definitely wish to hear more of your talks.
I appreciate it. I had a great time. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care.